Three, two, one. This is Nick.
And this is Amanda.
And this is the Performance Plate Podcast, where we give you bite-sized bits of information based on nutrition and exercise science to improve your overall performance. Welcome back to another episode of the Performance Plate Podcast. On this episode, we have a topic that is very fun and very cool. It's called macronutrients and how it pretty much affects your performance. Amanda, do you remember the if it fits your macros craze, or what that even was or is? You know what I'm talking about?
Yes. So what you're referring to is if it fits your macros, then it's good. Whether it's Whole Foods or it's McDonald's, as long as it fits in your macros, it's totally fine.
Yeah. Dude, but that
Is there
was,
like a okay, ahead.
yeah, it was such a crazy. So when Instagram like first came out, and me being a personal trainer then and bodybuilder, wanted to be a fitness model. Fun fact for anyone listening, I used to want to be a fitness model. I did a photo shoot, all this stuff. It's like really fun stuff that I went through. I was like, oh, this is going to be easy. Not easy. Don't ever think it's easy. But I would constantly follow all these before influencers even exist, these fitness people. And I would always see the hashtag, if it fits your macros. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like, awesome. But then you start learning, like people pick up that trend and they're like, oh yeah, it fits my macros. And you're seeing like it's McDonald's, and they waited all day to make sure that the McDonald's fit it into their macros. And I was like, well, that something's not right there.
So it's funny because I was probably in like 7th or 8th grade when Instagram first came out, and I think that's around the time period you're referring to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then I was in college.
So I don't remember it back then. I think back then I had just gotten into my Fitness Pal and calorie counting, and I
Okay.
wasn't really using it in the appropriate way. I was using it just to cut calories, and not really learning anything from it.
Yeah.
I was doing some HIIT workouts. I don't know if you know who Kayla. I don't even know if I'm saying her last name correctly. Kayla Itness.
Oh my
I
gosh, yes.
You know her?
Yeah. Well, I know of her. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you know
Yeah.
of her. Um, she's friends with Kelsey. Oh God, she's really famous too. Anyway, that was what I was into at the time. I don't think I really got into macros until like college.
Mhm.
Um, but I do know I am familiar with just the fact that people still kind of have adopted that mentality. As long as it fits your macros, it's okay. It's just like as long as you hit your calories, like it's all good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it necessarily true? No.
Well, that's what we're going to talk about, because it's true. I remember it's similar to some people that don't know what we're talking about in that aspect may know Weight Watchers, or I don't think it's called Weight Watchers anymore. But I think they changed it to something else. It may be Weight Watchers, or I don't know. But they used to give you a point system. The point system it made sense. However, some people did not use it correctly, because I remember when I was training, there was a Weight Watchers actually right next door. People would go to it and they're like, oh, I saved all my points today to have one donut. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense.
Oh yeah. I've actually had clients before that have come to me where they've used it in that way. I think they changed the way they do their point system, but I don't know if they changed their name.
Maybe that's what it was. I know something changed.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so like Amanda said, is that true? Like if it fits your calories or if it fits your macros, is it true? No. Like, is it the best option? Now,
That's like saying that your weight is your only health marker.
exactly. Yeah.
So it creates an issue because you could have someone that's at a quote unquote healthy weight or in like a healthy BMI, but internally you're seeing like down regulation of things, or maybe someone's insulin sensitive. Like you can't tell just by your body weight if
Yeah.
someone's healthy or not.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing with calories and macros. What makes up those calories and macros matters, because your nutrients matter, because your nutrients are what then go create things in your body and allow things to function optimally.
Yeah.
And if you're eating low amounts of nutrients, but also high amounts of things that you don't necessarily need in high amounts, like maybe sugar or trans fat, you're probably going to run into an issue just based off of science, right? We're not food shaming here. This is just literal science.
Yeah. Well, and so how do you feel like when you see the people that are like, I ate fast food for 60 days and I still lost weight. And it's like, oh, that's great that you're able to lose weight, but that goes off of what you were saying, where just because weight is not your only marker of health. And
Right.
Yeah.
And remember what was that movie that came out where the guy only ate McDonald's
Oh,
for
supersize me.
Super Size Me? Yes, I
Amazing.
remember watching that in health class in high school.
It
Which
did,
is
it does scar people. I will say that.
I don't know if it necessarily scarred me. I think I found it more interesting than anything. But again, it's that scenario where, okay, yes, calorie deficit and surplus does matter. And
Hmm.
you can definitely like lose or gain weight depending on if you're in a calorie surplus or deficit. But does it feel good and is it sustainable? Those are the questions.
Yeah. Well, so for everyone listening, real quick, Amanda, before we start rambling some more fun facts off,
Yes.
break down what is macronutrients for people that don't know. Most people may know,
Okay.
but just so people who don't know.
Okay. And also, tell me if I'm wrong, but I know that today we wanted to focus on macronutrients around athletic performance and recovery,
Hmm.
not just macronutrients, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So macronutrients, you have three main ones, protein, or you have three macronutrients, protein, carbs, and fat. Alcohol is technically like its own separate entity,
Hmm.
but we'll just put it underneath carbs for the sake of so it makes it easy.
Simplicity. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Um, so each one of those different macronutrients contain different micronutrients. So for example, like your protein contains amino acids, where your carbohydrates contain different types of fiber. And there's different vitamins and minerals and different quantities found in each. And your body needs all three of them to function optimally.
Hmm.
So carbohydrates are things like your fruits, vegetables, potatoes, rice, breads, pastas. Proteins are things like poultry, beef, fish.
Hmm.
Um, it's found in like tofu, edamame.
Hmm.
What you want to think about too, fat. Well, let me say fats first before I go into
Yeah.
this. Um, Fats, you want to think of like your oils, um, your milks, like dairy products.
Hmm.
Uh, Avocados are a good source, nuts, seeds, all those types of things.
Yeah.
When you think about a food, so say I always use oatmeal as the example.
Okay.
Meal is 150 calories per
Hmm.
serving. So half a cup of dried oats is 150 calories. Within that 150 calories, you have 27 grams of carbs. You have like 3 or 4 grams of protein, and then
Hmm.
like 1 or 2 grams of fat. So
Hmm.
it contains all three macronutrients,
Yeah.
but it's a majority of carbs. So you would
Yeah.
say that it's a carbohydrate rich food. So then you would track it as a carbohydrate
Okay.
or
Yeah.
classify as a carbohydrate.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. When you
So
break it
that
down,
you can
it's so
kind of
simple,
clear
right?
it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I know, because I know that can be really confusing for people.
Hmm.
Um, just the difference between like macros and calories and grams and
Yes.
what the heck is even all that stuff.
Exactly. And we want people to know like it can be simple, but there's a whole complex thing to it besides, like Amanda said, micronutrients that are built in from the macronutrients. And there's all these other things. So what she was talking about, and this is where the performance aspect comes into play, is remember, not all food sources are the same. So if you're not having whole foods or rich foods with micronutrients as well that make up those macros, you're probably not going to help your performance as much.
Right, exactly. And the other thing you want to think about too is like, you know, a, something that athletes commonly struggle with
Hmm.
if they're always trying to hit a certain calorie goal or macronutrient goal is diversity. And
Yes.
their
Yeah.
diet's lacking diversity, then they're also lacking different vitamins and minerals,
Hmm.
and they're also lacking uh, diversity for the gut.
Mm.
And over time, that's going to cause an issue.
Yeah.
Again, like even if the athlete looks fine on the outside, even if their weight hasn't changed, right,
Yeah.
there still could be down regulation of things going on internally.
Hmm.
And that would really be, you would be able to tell through biofeedback and how they're feeling and performing, um, and that sort of thing.
Yeah. It's one of those aspects of nutrition we don't think about. People say, "Oh, I eat the same 3 meals a day for the rest of my life. Makes my life easy. I don't have to think about it." You're right.
Mhm.
It does make your life easy. You don't have to think about it because if I know Monday I'm having chicken, rice, and green beans, and then I'm having chicken, rice, and green beans for the next 6 weeks, wonderful. Life is easy in that. Their thought process is not there. That's why Amanda is a very big component of meal prepping certain things because then you can make your life easier and have a diversity of foods to eat. So you're one, not bored because a lot of people fall off of their nutritional plan, we could say, because they're bored and they're like, I can't eat the same thing over and over again. This is ridiculous. I'm tired of dried boiled chicken, you know? um, Two,
Yeah,
you get a diversity from that where it's like, okay, well, now I feel like I'm living a little bit because a lot of people don't want to feel like they're constrained.
right, exactly. Yeah, because you're also going to have different cravings for different things. Like food should be exciting, it should be enjoyable.
Hmm.
But again, even if you were just strictly thinking about performance and recovery,
Yeah.
you still would want a diversity. And that's why
Yeah.
there's also off seasons too,
Hmm.
because your diet will change with those off seasons. Like it's not always optimal to be eating really high amounts of protein.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that you do have higher and lower periods that allow for other foods to come in because um if you're always focused on like animal proteins, well, maybe you're not getting enough vegetables and
Hmm.
fruits and things of that nature. So making sure that there is, space for those things as well.
Yeah, that's a huge. I like how you say they're off season. Like you think of you have your training season where you want to probably have a little bit more, depending on your sport, maybe a little bit more carbohydrates, maybe focus on a little bit more protein. Um, but off season is a huge way to put it because you think of off season, I was like, all right, yeah, like I'm off of track season's over, football season's over, whatever it is over.
Mhm.
Let me just continue with my same diet. But maybe there's something too, and there is something too, that's why you're saying it, that you need to have an off season to switch up your diet a little bit. Maybe you're going, you know, take a break from the high protein diet and see what happens and let your body adapt to the new thing to get new nutrients in to formulate, as you always say to people, a more robust gut.
Yeah, exactly. It's true. It's true. And that's like, it comes back to, again, having diversity. That's what really creates the most robust gut because
Hmm.
when you're eliminating foods, you're increasing your chances for allergies, sensitivities, and things later on, which
Hmm.
isn't ideal. Um,
Yeah.
Now, when you think about sports nutrition, so first off, it's important to recognize that people get entire master's degrees in just sports nutrition, so you can
Yes.
specialize down to it because there
Yeah.
is just so much to cover and learn. But the
Hmm.
three biggest things that people normally are concerned about and asking about are quantity, timing, and
Yes.
quality of food, and what's important where.
Yeah.
Um, Personally, depending on, I mean, with athletes, like I would say the quantity, then the
Hmm.
quality, and then the timing.
Okay. Which is
Now,
interesting.
yeah, considering what we just talked about.
Yes.
But if you're thinking about an athlete that, well, we'll take powerlifting, for example, something you
Yeah.
work with powerlifting athletes. How do
Yeah.
they eat?
A lot. No,
What
but
does it consist of?
it depends. I mean, honestly, it's what they can because they're trying to keep size on. It's more or less what they can what's palatable to them. So there are some athletes that will only eat the same things over and over again, and they make sure that one, they're getting enough protein. I know they focus on protein and carbs the most, depending on if they have a nutritionist or not. Some don't, some do. If they don't, from what I hear, is it's a lot of focus on protein and carbs, depending on where they are in their season and all that stuff and training. And some deal with timing a little bit more. So I don't think quality is as important. I think a lot, and this is just athletes in general too, because me myself, I think of timing and I got away from timing to be honest with you for the longest time, but I used to only think timing and quantity. That
Hmm.
was my main things always. I never
Yes.
really thought of quality.
Right. Which that again, a lot of athletes, a lot of bodybuilders think, and it is true to a certain extent because you have to consider the person's goal. Like a
Hmm.
power lifter might be okay with the trade-off of not feeling their optimal best for periods of time when they're competing. Because if I were to walk in and tell a power lifter, hey, like start eating all this healthy food and they have a hard time getting it down, well, now
Hmm.
their performance is going to go down and that's their motivating factor.
Yes.
So that the quantity is going to be more important than the quality in that scenario.
Hmm.
Now, the key is though they're not competing year round, right? So
Yes.
there is room for both. And I
Hmm.
think that that's why it's just important to be aware of the positives and the negatives in any choice in any situation when it comes to athletics,
Yeah.
because the more special more specified, is that
Yeah.
the right word?
Yep.
the like the more you are in a specialty, I don't know
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say, the more, strategic the plan is going to have to be.
Hmm.
And, again, it's, yeah, that's why you got to consider the athlete's goal.
Yes. Take it in the whole picture if you're working with an athlete, or you yourself are an athlete and you're looking to compete in something. Take in the whole picture of what your goal is. Like,
Right.
for example, if you're, they say this too, if before you go to a competition, we'll say whatever it may be, you're not going to choose the day before to decide to try to eat a whole bag of broccoli that you've never eaten before. Like that fiber is gonna, you're gonna be having bowel movements like crazy, you know?
Right. Or the opposite.
Or the exactly, or the opposite.
Yeah,
Get
exactly.
really backed
Now,
up.
the other thing to consider though, too, if you are a high level athlete and you are having trouble, there are supplements out there that can help.
Hmm.
If you're not able to do it through your diet at that point in time.
And I, I, I know that's one of those things where supplementation is used for specifically.
Hmm.
There are times and place for supplements.
Hmm.
If you're only using supplements to fix a year-long diet of the same three foods, yeah,
Hmm.
no go.
No. Yes.
But if you're using it because you're getting ready for something and you know, for example, let's say red meat always makes you feel like crap, no matter what. You try it all the time, you eat all sorts of red meat, whether it's the leanest cut, whether it's the fattiest cut, and you feel like crap, and there's creatine in that red meat, and you may not be getting it. Maybe time to supplement it because you don't want to feel like crap for your lifts or your competition. So maybe that's the
Right.
time to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's even thinking about it in terms of like a lifestyle client that's going into a dieting phase,
Hmm.
knowing that their body's going to need extra rest and recovery during that time because you are putting on a stressor,
Hmm.
so they're going to get more sleep then, right? Like
Yeah.
you have to understand the trade-offs and you have to understand how to support yourself through some of those more intense periods where you're not
Yes.
just, functioning as a maintenance
Hmm.
lifestyle chilling kind of vibe.
Yeah, no, it's true. You want to make sure you understand what you're aiming for, and that's where you want, if you're going to be and want to be a high level athlete and get to that level of athleticism, you do know need to understand that nutrition is a huge factor, but understand there's waves of everything. You're just
Mhm.
like Amanda said, off season is something for both training and for nutrition, which personally I never thought of before as off season of nutrition.
Right.
Because I work out all the time, but I'm not training for anything specific. So when I do, I'll think of that like, oh crap, like we should probably dial it in, or
Yeah.
do this or do that, or make sure
Yeah.
that I know I'm not going to eat red meat, so I take my creatine, or I know this, or that. So I take, let's say, a vitamin B complex or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And another example too would be with an athlete that maybe just struggles to get food in.
Hmm.
If they're gonna have a hard time getting in whole foods because they're very filling or maybe they're having trouble digesting them, well, any food is gonna be better than no food at that point. So
Hmm.
you have to think about that too.
Like shakes and all that stuff. Yeah.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
it's a huge factor I think people overlook sometimes is it's hard to get a lot of food down. You
Yeah,
know?
when you're training like that at those higher levels, it is hard.
Yeah. You don't have, correct me if I'm wrong, but you don't get the feeling of hunger. Your hunger cues are off because you may either train through them or they may just be completely off. So sometimes you just eat because you know you need to eat.
Right, right,
And,
exactly. It's
and
not
then,
necessary. Well, it's not intuitive eating. You're eating for based on a particular outcome.
yes, exactly. So I really want
Shouldn't say
people,
it's not intuitive eating because it can be, it's a
yeah,
mix, but
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not just intuitive eating.
Yeah,
There's a
exactly that.
goal. Yeah.
It's depending on your goal. I really want people to understand too, like your macronutrients play a huge factor in performance and making sure that if you don't know what's going on, like if you don't know even know where to start, please reach out to somebody to find some assistance. There are a
Yeah.
bunch of coaches out there. There are a bunch of people. Amanda can help you. I mean, it's wild to think that like don't just be if you want to get to that level, don't just be winging it and be like, I think I need to take in this much protein, So break down, Amanda, how do you calculate people's, I know it's hard, it's gonna be hard, it's complicated, but as simple
Yeah.
as you can, break down how what you would do with an athlete in deciding their macros and helping them kind of figure all that stuff out. Because I
Yeah,
know you can
no,
just plug it into MyFitnessPal, but I don't know if that's 100% accurate. Um,
no. And that's where, yeah. And the calculation is just a calculation, right? It's
mhm.
not taking into account the person, their past
Yeah.
dieting history. You have to understand your metabolism is a accumulation of all the past decisions you've made in terms of
Hmm.
food, sleep, stress. You could go as far as traumas to the system, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's accumulation of all those things. So if I have, someone comes to me, just start tracking and seeing where they're at for a
Hmm.
majority of the time. So everyone knows when they sign up with me, the first thing I have them do is log their food. I don't tell them to change anything. I don't tell them to do anything. Let's just look at what you consistently eat
Yeah.
and then let's go from there. Um, you can use calculations in like a general sense,
Mhm.
it doesn't hurt to have, but you also want to consider that a lot of them may overshoot. Um, so you might want to, use it conservatively.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
and also just tailor it to the athlete or the person's needs.
Hmm.
So for example, like protein, depending on the type of training, you might be consuming anywhere from 1.2 to 2 grams per kilogram of body weight, depending on the type of training.
Yeah.
If you are someone that has energy restricted, say you're in a dieting period or you have an injury, maybe you're above eating 2 grams per kilogram of body weight. Um, yeah, so it really depends. It's kind of, it's a fair question asked, but it's also I can't give you one straight answer because it does depend on
Hmm.
uh, a variety of factors.
Yeah. So in general, what would you say? Who's focusing more on protein? Who's focusing more on carbs based on their sport?
Well,
Meaning
if you're
like endurance athletes are probably more looking towards carb heavy, carb heavier during in-season training as opposed to protein heavy, where bodybuilders are a different story because they're just trying to
yeah.
hold on to lean muscle mass.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. You're saying
Yes.
the split between those two. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You have to think about the training at hand. Keep in mind though, too, like you want to have adequate carbs for any sort of high intensity weightlifting, although it's
Hmm.
not, you know, hit training where you're like jumping around and then doing something else. It is high intensity. So like you will need bursts of energy. You will need
Yes.
glucose. You will need those
Hmm.
stores. Um, Sprints will,
Hmm.
you'll still need to have enough carbs in your system.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, yeah.
Nice. It's it's such a cool thing to break down when you actually get like you can nerd out. I mean, I know you can and I can nerd out about how much can go into, like you said, people get whole degrees in just sports nutrition in
Mhm.
general, which is shows how much there is just based on perfectly fueling your body. And as we talked to, like you've heard our friend Gavin talk about recomping after a weigh-in for a powerlifting meet where he has 2 hours to fully recomp after he's been in the sauna for a while, sweating a lot of out. Like, and his coach that recomps him, it's like he's got like a mad scientist kind of. And
Yeah,
something like what you're saying is it's so in detail how little things can just like if you don't know where to start, yes, there's a general thing you can start with. Probably just track where you're at, see what you're taking in. And if you're
right.
noticing you're not taking in anywhere near the average daily recommended amount of protein or carbs for your sport, then maybe try and get those first. But if
Yeah,
you're truly trying to get to the next level of training and take your training seriously or compete in something, you may want to get yourself a coach who can really tailor you towards what you need. And that's, I think everyone should really think about what Amanda said about off season of diets. And we're not saying off season like, all right, I just eat pizza all the time.
no, being strategic about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Using that time to work on other things
Hmm.
that may get ignored during your season.
Yeah. And we talked about it kind of during our leaky gut episode. So if you haven't listened to that one, definitely take a listen to it of how high intensity training can affect the gut microbiome and create these things called dysbiosis and
Yep.
all of that. We discussed that because it's a huge thing to think about where sometimes you just can't have everything done all at once. Amanda, you say it best. I'm going to quote you terribly. I can do hard things, but I can't do them all at once.
Yes. No, that's it. I can do
Yeah.
hard things. I just can't do them all at the same time.
And it's true. And it comes back to your nutrition too. So with your macronutrients, there's going to be phases of getting a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that, a little bit more of that. but understand those phases are not forever, and you're not
Mhm.
going to be living stuck with a no carb. I just use no carb because that's a popular one where people are like, I don't want to do the no carb, high protein
Yeah.
diet for the rest of my life. Well, you shouldn't have to.
Right. Yeah. It's again, you want that diversity. You want different seasons, different phases. Different phases are going to require different mindsets,
Hmm.
whether you're a lifestyle client that's going from a maintenance to a dieting phase, or
Hmm.
you're like going from your season to off season.
Yes. And to sum it up, you really need to dial in those macronutrients, but make sure that you're getting a little bit of everything. Uh, and at a certain point, you do want to look at the quality of your food because that does matter. It doesn't always matter about calories in depending on performance and things. You want to make sure that you're getting some quality. And timing is kind of the last thing you need to worry about. Obviously, don't go into completely unfed for 3 days and go train as hard as possible. That's probably not a good idea.
Yeah, you don't want to just stop eating, or the timing's going again, it's going to vary from case to case, but
Hmm.
you might not want to just save all your food for one meal,
Yes.
when in actuality, like spreading it out throughout the day would be more helpful for you in your sport.
Yes, definitely. Totally, definitely. So your body can work with something.
Yeah.
Um, awesome. So another great episode. Thank you, Amanda. This was awesome learning about macronutrients and how, like it said, I think my biggest takeaway, honestly, was the off season. I I think that's huge, especially for training, because you don't think of an off season. People they do sports and then they just go right back on their diet like they're still training appropriately, and you may not need that. You may not need that surplus. You may not need whatever it is at that time. So, as always, Amanda, awesome episode. Until next time. And if you're listening on Spotify, Apple, please rate us, please review us. If you're listening on YouTube, give it a like, subscribe to all channels so we can continue to share this fun stuff with you guys.